FIFA stood in front of the world and declared it the cleanest World Cup in history. 104 matches, 48 nations, a month of football played across 3 countries and dozens of cities. And according to the most powerful governing body in sport, not a single one of those games showed the faintest trace of a fixed result. Then, less than 24 hours later, a second organization released a very different document: 7 red flags, 15 matches placed under heightened watch. 12 separate controversies pulled apart and examined by specialists whose entire job is to catch the things governing bodies would rather nobody noticed. And sitting at the center of the storm was 1 red card, 1 overturned suspension, and a phone call from the most powerful man on the planet. In this video, we break down the betting investigation hanging over the 2026 World Cup. The 2 reports that contradict each other within a single day. The matches that made the watchdogs nervous. The $240 billion that moved through the tournament. And the one decision that even a former FIFA president said should never have been allowed to happen. Let us start with the 2 reports, because the timing of them tells you almost everything. It was late July. The final had already been played. Spain were world champions, having beaten Argentina 1-0 after extra time at the enormous stadium in New Jersey, a second world title to go with their triumph back in 2010. The confetti had been swept up. The trophy had been lifted. The tournament, as far as the public was concerned, was over. And on a Tuesday, FIFA decided to close the book with a victory lap. The organization's integrity task force went public with its conclusions. They had monitored the betting markets throughout the competition. They had watched for the patterns that betray a fixed game. And they announced, with obvious pride, that they had found nothing. No suspicious betting activity. No indications of manipulation connected to any fixture. Across all 104 matches, a clean sheet. For a governing body that has spent much of the last 2 decades fighting off scandal after scandal, it was the perfect ending. Proof that the systems worked. Proof that the biggest World Cup ever assembled had also been the most honest. The celebration lasted less than a day. Because on the Wednesday, a different set of findings began to circulate, reported first by The Athletic and tied to the Council of Europe. And these findings did not describe a spotless tournament at all. They described a competition dotted with moments that specialists could not fully explain. Money that moved when it should not have moved. Markets that opened at times that made no sense. Decisions on the pitch that lined up a little too neatly with the decisions being made in the betting world. The 2 documents could not both be right. One said the tournament was clean. The other said, in the careful language these organizations always use, that a number of things deserved a much closer look. So who exactly produced that second report? Because this is not some anonymous blog or a group of angry fans on the internet. This is one of the most respected match-fixing watchdogs in the entire sport. They are called the Group of Copenhagen, an independent international body linked to the Council of Europe, operating under a treaty known as the Balogun Convention, which was written specifically to fight the manipulation of sports competitions across borders. Their entire reason for existing is to detect, to sanction, and to prevent the fixing of games. They are not in the business of selling headlines. They are in the business of protecting the integrity of the sport, quietly, in the background, whether anybody is watching or not. And for this World Cup, they watched everything. All 104 matches passed under their monitoring. They use a color-coded system to sort what they see. Green means normal, nothing to worry about. Yellow means a slightly raised alert, a situation that shows more than one indicator of something being off. Orange means the concern has grown, and red is the highest level of all. By the end of the tournament, the Group of Copenhagen had placed 15 matches under enhanced surveillance. They analyzed 12 major controversies for integrity risks, and they issued 7 yellow notices. 7 separate situations where the signs of possible irregularity crossed the threshold that demanded a formal flag. And for the first time in the organization's history, they did something new. They monitored the prediction markets, continuously, in real time. That detail is the key to this entire story, so hold on to it. Because the 2026 World Cup was not just the biggest tournament ever played. It was the first one staged in a world where anyone, anywhere, could log on to a crypto-based prediction platform and place a wager on almost anything. Not just who wins, not just the score, but whether a specific player would step onto the pitch for a specific match. And they could do it anonymously, funded by cryptocurrency, with none of the paperwork that traditional bookmakers require. The numbers involved are difficult to even process. According to the Group of Copenhagen, roughly $240 billion was wagered across this World Cup. $240 billion. That is nearly double the amount bet on the 2022 tournament in Qatar. Part of that explosion is simple math. The World Cup grew from 64 matches in 2022 to 104 matches in 2026, when the field expanded to 48 teams for the first time. More games means more betting. But part of it is the prediction markets, the new frontier, the platforms that barely existed at the last World Cup, and now sit at the heart of a scandal at this one. When that much money is flowing through that many channels, some strange patterns are almost guaranteed to appear by pure chance. The watchdogs know that. Nobody is claiming that 7 flags out of 104 matches proves a conspiracy. But some of those flags were strange enough and specific enough that the people whose job is to notice simply could not look away. Let us walk through them. The first sign came in the very first game of the entire tournament. South Africa were playing Mexico, one of the host nations, in an opening match watched by the entire planet. And late in that game, in the 84th minute, a South African midfielder named Themba Zwane was shown a red card. It reduced his team to 9 men before the final whistle, a collapse in numbers at the worst possible moment, in the most visible match of the group stage. On its own, a late red card is nothing unusual. Players lose their heads. Referees make calls. It happens in football every single day. But the Group of Copenhagen flagged it, because when they lined up the incident against the betting activity around that match, something in the pattern did not sit right. Not proof, not an accusation, a flag. A note that said, this one deserves a second look. And that was only the beginning. The next flag would go on to become one of the strangest subplots of the whole tournament, and it involved a team that most people had written off before a single ball was kicked. Cape Verde, a tiny island nation. First-time qualifiers up against Spain, one of the outright favorites to win the entire competition. On paper, it was a mismatch, a formality. Spain were expected to stroll through it. But over on Polymarket, the crypto prediction platform that the watchdogs were now watching closely, something odd was happening. Money was pouring in on the outcome that made no sense. Roughly $4.8 million was wagered on the idea that Spain would fail to beat Cape Verde. Not lose, necessarily. Just fail to win. And then the game was played. And Spain, the tournament favorites, the eventual world champions, were held to a scoreless draw. 0-0, one of the first genuine shocks of the entire World Cup. And a small mountain of money staked on exactly that improbable result paid out. Now, there is an innocent explanation for this, and we are going to give it its full weight later, because it matters. But in the moment, sitting inside a monitoring operation watching prediction markets for the first time ever, a multi-million-dollar surge on a shock result that then actually happened is precisely the kind of thing that sets off alarms. And here is a detail that makes the story almost poetic. The player at the heart of the next flag on the list was a Spanish forward named Ferran Torres. The same Ferran Torres who, weeks later, would come off the bench in the final and score the only goal of the match to make Spain champions of the world. His name is woven through this tournament in the best possible way and, according to the watchdogs, in one uncomfortable way too. Because in Spain's 4-0 win over Saudi Arabia, Torres had a goal disallowed. And the way it was disallowed raised eyebrows. The video assistant referee team took 3.5 minutes to reach their decision. 3.5 minutes. In a process that is supposed to bring speed and clarity, an eternity passed before the goal was ruled out. Long V. AR delays are frustrating for everyone. But to a group monitoring for manipulation, a delay that long, on a decision that swung the shape of the scoreline, in a match where the betting markets were active, was worth a flag of its own. Again, not proof, not a claim that anyone did anything wrong. Simply a moment that did not fit the pattern of a normal game, noticed by people trained to notice. South Africa, Cape Verde, Saudi Arabia, each one a thread, each one a yellow notice. But none of them, not even close, match the flag that sits at the very center of this entire investigation. Because the biggest red flag of the 2026 World Cup did not just involve a strange bet or a slow decision. It involved a red card, a rule that had almost never been used, a national soccer federation, a European governing body in open revolt, and a phone call placed by the President of the United States. This is the one everybody is talking about, and to understand it, we have to go back to the 1st of July. The United States, co-hosts of the tournament, were playing Bosnia and Herzegovina in the round of 32, the first knockout round of this expanded format, and their best player, their leading scorer of the entire tournament, was a forward named Balogun, a striker who plays his club football in France for Monaco, and who had already scored 3 times for the American team, the man they were counting on. In the second half, Balogun went up for a challenge and came down awkwardly, stepping on the ankle of a Bosnian defender named Tarek Muharamovic. The referee judged it worthy of a red card. Balogun was sent off. The United States still won the match 2-0 and advanced. But under the normal rules of football, a red card in one game means a suspension for the next one. And the next one was enormous. The round of 16 against Belgium, a knockout match that the United States could not afford to lose, and now they would have to play it without their most dangerous attacker. That should have been the end of it. A hard break, but the rules are the rules, and every team lives by them. Except the very next day, the 2nd of July, something strange appeared on Polymarket. A brand new market opened, asking a single question. Would Folarin Balogun play against Belgium? Think about what that means for a second. Balogun had just been sent off. Under the ordinary rules, he was suspended. There was no obvious reason to believe he would be available. And yet a market appeared, inviting people to bet on whether the suspension would somehow be lifted on the very same day the red card was shown. Here is the part that turned a curiosity into a genuine red flag. Over the course of this tournament, 15 players in total were sent off. 14 of them received their red cards without any prediction market ever opening to ask whether their bans might be waived. Not one. The suspensions were treated as automatic, because that is what they are. Only. Balogun got a market. Only Balogun's punishment was treated, from the moment it happened, as something that might be reversed. And then it was reversed, because behind the scenes, a very powerful person had gotten involved. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, personally telephoned the FIFA President Gianni Infantino and asked him to review the red card. The President made no secret of his opinion, arguing publicly that the challenge was never a foul in the first place, that his country's star striker had been wronged. And on the 5th of July, 3 days after that market first appeared on Polymarket, FIFA's disciplinary committee made its move. They did not tear up the red card entirely. Instead, they reached for an obscure provision, Article 27 of the Disciplinary Code, which allows a judicial body to suspend the implementation of a punishment, placing the player on a probationary period instead. In plain terms, the suspension was frozen. Balogun was cleared to play against Belgium after all. FIFA insisted the sanction had not simply vanished. They pointed out that they had fined the United States Soccer Federation $40,000, and they argued that Article 27 was not unheard of, that similar decisions had been made during the World Cup qualifiers. They framed it as a balanced measure, a more thoughtful approach than a blunt automatic ban. Almost nobody outside of FIFA bought it. Belgium's Football Association was the first to erupt. Their next opponents were now getting their best player back through a decision that had never been properly explained to them. They said they were astonished. They launched an appeal. And when that appeal was rejected, they revealed that they had still not even received the written reasoning behind the original decision, the very document they needed to challenge it. They felt the process had been closed off before they ever had a fair chance to fight it. Europe's governing body went further. UEFA declared that the decision had crossed a red line, expressing open disbelief at what they called an unprecedented, incomprehensible, and unjustifiable move. This was not a small complaint from a minor federation. This was the most powerful confederation in world football telling FIFA, in public, that it had done something indefensible. And then came a voice from FIFA's own past. Sepp Blatter, the former president of the organization, a man who knows exactly how its machinery works from the inside, weighed in with words that cut to the heart of it. He argued that red cards are supposed to be overturned by rules, by evidence, and by independent bodies, never by phone calls. He asked, pointedly, where FIFA thought it was heading, and warned that football must never become a playground for power. When a former head of your own organization is publicly asking whether you have lost your way, the situation has stopped being a sporting dispute and become something much larger. So the market had appeared, the suspension had been lifted. The most decorated critics in the game had lined up to condemn it. And now, finally, the match itself arrived. Balogun took the field against Belgium in Seattle, the whole controversy hanging over every touch. And here is the twist that no amount of intervention could control. The United States lost, not narrowly. They were beaten 4-1. Belgium simply outplayed them, and the star striker whose availability had caused an international incident could not change the outcome. The Americans were knocked out, and with that defeat, all three host nations, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, were eliminated from their own World Cup. The president had made his call. FIFA had bent its own rules. A prediction market had somehow known to ask the question days before the answer arrived, and in the end, none of it mattered on the scoreboard. Belgium won anyway. But the questions did not go away when the final whistle blew. If anything, they grew louder. Because it is one thing for a controversial decision to help a team win. It is another thing entirely for a betting market to open on that decision, before the decision was ever made. The result of the match did not erase the strangeness of the timing. It only sharpened it. Now, this is the moment where we have to slow down and be fair, because the story does not end with the accusation. It ends with the uncertainty, and the uncertainty is real. A yellow notice is not a conviction. It is not even a formal charge. It is a flag, a request for clarification, an invitation to look closer. The group of Copenhagen itself has been careful not to claim that any of these 7 notices proves that a single match was fixed or that anyone exercised improper influence over a result. That distinction is not a technicality. It is the entire point. These are questions, not verdicts. And there are innocent explanations, some of them quite convincing. Take the Spain and Cape Verde bet, that $4.8 million surge on a shock draw. A gambling industry expert named Christian Kalb, who has actually worked with the group of Copenhagen in the past, offered a very ordinary reason it might have happened. Prediction markets, he pointed out, are not only used by people trying to profit from inside information, they are also used by traditional bookmakers to protect themselves. Imagine a small bookmaker who has taken an enormous number of bets on a heavy favorite like Spain. That bookmaker is now exposed. If Spain win, they lose a fortune. So they might go to a prediction platform and place their own bet on Spain not winning, purely to balance their books. That single defensive move from one nervous bookmaker could look from the outside exactly like a suspicious surge of money on an unlikely result. Not corruption. The same kind of reasoning can be applied elsewhere. A 3.5-minute VAR delay might simply be a difficult decision that took a long time to get right. A late red card might just be a player losing his composure. A prediction market opening on Balogun might reflect nothing more than gamblers correctly sensing that a co-host nation with a powerful, engaged president would fight harder than usual for its star player and pricing that instinct into a bet. FIFA, for its part, has stood firmly by its own conclusion. Its Integrity Task Force insists it found no evidence of manipulation across the entire tournament, and the organization has treated its clean bill of health as the definitive word. The group of Copenhagen has shared its report and is waiting for FIFA to explain the flagged incidents. 2 respected bodies looking at the same tournament, arriving at genuinely different places. That is where things actually stand. Not a proven scandal, a profound disagreement between the people responsible for guarding the game. So what are we really left with? We are left with a picture of football entering a new and uncertain era. For most of its history, the sport worried about a specific kind of corruption: a bribed referee, a goalkeeper paid to let one in, a gangster in the shadows arranging a result. Those threats were human, personal, and traceable. You could follow the money and often find the man. The 2026 World Cup revealed a different landscape entirely. $240 billion in wagers. Anonymous accounts. Cryptocurrency payments that leave a fainter trail than cash ever did. And prediction markets where you can bet not on the game itself, but on the decisions that surround it, on whether a player will be cleared, on whether a ban will hold, on the rulings of committees behind closed doors. The betting has moved beyond the 90 minutes on the pitch and into the machinery of the sport itself. And that is why this investigation matters, whether or not a single one of these 7 flags ever turns into proof of wrongdoing. Because the most unsettling detail in the entire story is not that money moved. Money always moves. It is that a market opened on Lauren Balogun's suspension being lifted before the people in charge of the sport had decided to lift it. Somewhere out there, wagers were being placed on an outcome that, by every normal rule of the game, should not have been on the table at all. Maybe that is a coincidence. Maybe it is the crowd wisdom of millions of gamblers reading the winds better than the rulebook. Or maybe it is a warning, an early glimpse of a future in which the outcomes that matter are not only the goals, but the decisions, and where the people who can predict those decisions or influence them hold a kind of power the sport has never had to defend against before. The group of Copenhagen has done its part. It watched all 104 matches, raised its 7 flags, and handed its questions to the most powerful body in football. Now the sport has to decide whether those questions deserve a real answer, or whether the celebration of the cleanest World Cup in history was more comfortable than the truth. Spain are the champions, and nothing in this story takes that away from them. They were the best team in the tournament, and they proved it on the biggest stage of all. But the tournament they won will be remembered for more than the trophy. It will be remembered as the moment the betting caught up with the beautiful game, and the guardians of the sport realized they were no longer entirely sure what they were watching. Whether that is the start of a genuine reckoning or the last false alarm before real trouble arrives, nobody yet knows. The report has been filed. The questions have been asked. And football, for the first time, is being forced to wonder whether the biggest threat to the game is no longer on the pitch at all, but in the endless, anonymous, unfathomable ocean of money swirling around it.